This video is to help those of you who are banging your wrist when you clean or snatch the kettlebell. So I'm going to teach you guys how to make sure that you minimize that, and if you are noticing that you're banging your wrist, we can correct it. First thing I'm going to point out is these nifty little guys. These are just sweatbands that you can put on your wrist. They're very inexpensive, and I always keep a stock of them in my gym for practitioners that are coming in. And when it comes time to learn the clean and the snatch, just a little wristband, it's just a sweatband, that's all it is, can really go a long way to providing a little bit of cushioning. If somebody's really still having a hard time, of course, you can double them up. But these are, like $4 for a 10 pack or less. They're not expensive, and that can be really handy. You should not need these for the long term, but it will probably be a benefit to you on the first day or two that you're learning the clean and the snatch especially, okay? So that's the first thing to be said. Next thing, let's get into the movement with the kettlebell. I will point out that I'm using or demonstrating here with an 18-pound kettlebell, which is very, very light for demonstration purposes, which works great. I would say the only drawback of the 18-pound kettlebell for me specifically in this demonstration is that the window, meaning the gap between the bell and the inside of the handle, is really small on this bell, and for that reason my hand doesn't really go through the window very far as it normally would. Normally the bell would sit a little bit lower, but just so you guys are aware, this bell is sitting up a little bit higher on my wrist than a heavier kettlebell would for that reason, okay? Now let's begin. First things first, if you're banging your wrist doing a clean, you've already tried this, or you don't want to attempt it because you know that you might bang your wrist, this is where you start. You start off by learning the rack position. You have to know the destination, right? You have to know where that bell is going to end up, and you have to be comfortable in this position before you start moving the kettlebell into this position in a very high tempo fashion, right? It's a really good idea to get a really good feel for that rack position, fist under the chin, the bell touching the chest. This one's a really small kettlebell, so it doesn't even barely touch my arm, but the back of the arm and the bicep. So those are the 3 points of contact. And then just get comfortable, switch sides, and I'll try not to tap on that microphone, and just get really comfortable holding this kettlebell in the rack position. It should feel very natural for you to be here and not here or any other variation. No gap between your arm and your chest. Everything really close to your body. Okay, so that's your destination with the clean. If you don't know where you're going, it's going to be really hard to get there. So now let's get into the movement itself, where we're going to try not to bang the wrist as we clean the kettlebell. First thing I will say in regards to the movement itself of the kettlebell is that the ball of the bell, the mass of this kettlebell, will never get any higher than this point right here as I clean the kettlebell up. If you're banging your wrist, it's because the bell is getting higher than that, and it's coming up, over, and smack. Up and down. Okay? That's why you're banging your wrist, or that's what people are telling you they're doing, and you are watching this video in advance to make sure you don't bang your wrist, which is great. So the bell never gets any higher than this point here. So as you come down, you're going to start to put that bell to the back of the wrist as it starts to float. And you transition from a hook grip into the punch or the spear hand pushing through that window of that kettlebell. So coming down to a hook and up. And as you can see, that kettlebell, it rolls off to the side. There's a little bit of rotation, and it just rolls off to the side. When the wrist and the kettlebell come into contact with each other, they're both moving in the same direction. So for that reason, there really is no banging. The kettlebell is floating upwards when the wrist comes into contact. So if you watch, again, that kettlebell is not getting any higher than this point here. Hook to punch. Now, if you guys notice something else, I want you guys to pay attention to this movement and notice how, as I do this, I'm very relaxed. I'm not overworking the exercise. And this is extremely important. It's something that I work and coach with people when they start training with kettlebells on almost every single lift, swings, clean snatches. Very common to see people putting way more tension into muscles that could be easily relaxed. And a part of that relaxation I want you to notice right now is in the grip and in the hand, okay? I'm not gonna over grip that kettlebell like this, and on the way down and up, hold on to it for dear life with a tight fist, okay? This is really a lesson that should be taught separately from banging the wrist lesson, but it applies to this. If you're still gripping on, then learn how to do that transition from the spear down into the hook and then back up into the spear. It's really important. It's gonna all play a part in you not banging your wrist when you clean and snatch. Because if you're holding on for dear life, that bell is gonna act in different ways. And a lot of times it kind of delays the movement of the bell because you're gripping on and you're holding it, and so it doesn't move freely. So make sure you have a good hook to spear, and make sure the kettlebell never gets any higher. And you know, you guys, you got your wristbands on, right? You can be using a 9-pound kettlebell. And so really for this, just make everything as easy as possible, right? Like even my range of motion doing this, because I got such a light bell, my range of motion is tiny. I'm really just underworking everything as I just allow my body just to focus on that one thing, getting that bell. Okay, and now once I've done that, of course, I can increase the load a little bit, and I can play around with the exercise. The clean, for me, is a transportation exercise. It's a way to get the kettlebell from the ground up to the shoulder so that then I can do my actual lift, right? But I do a lot of cleans and a lot of swings. It's one of those things that you want it to become automatic. So there you go, there's the clean, and this would apply. There's some people when they swing, they like to point their thumb back behind them. Other people don't like to do that. They keep the thumb pointed forward. I think that's personal preference. But either way, whichever one you choose, it applies. That bell never gets higher than this position right here, and it just moves off to the side. Use your sweatbands, watch the video, watch the way that I'm moving, and learn how not to overwork it and transition that grip from hook to spear, okay? Now let's move into the snatch, the kettlebell snatch. And this is probably a little bit more challenging to learn, but I think that if you've learned in order, you've already learned how to clean before you snatch, because the snatch is a progression of the clean. So while I would say this is harder, by the time you get to the kettlebell snatch, your skill set should be greater and more honed, and therefore you'll probably actually pick this up a little bit faster, okay? Same rule applies that we talked about at the very beginning with the clean, which is the bell never gets any higher than this. Okay, if I, is that on camera? If I let this bell come up and over as I snatch it, up, over, and smack, that's where I run into problems, okay? The point of contact with a snatch with the kettlebell to the wrist is not 12 o'clock. The point of contact is more like 10 o'clock right here. Okay, so I'll demonstrate. Now, as I do this, I'm going to show you guys the progressions that you can make just in the movement alone to develop this skill. So start off with a one-handed swing. Then move into a one-handed swing that we would call a high pull, where you're pulling that weight up your body. You're taming the arc of the kettlebell. And just like what you learned with the clean, the kettlebell is making a U-turn because it goes back behind you. It's not down in a squat. Kettlebell makes a U-turn and starts climbing up your body. Now from here, we're going to float it up a little bit higher. And once it gets to like above eye level and it's floating, you're going to rotate the kettlebell on the axis of the mass of the bell and punch the handle underneath the kettlebell while it floats, like this. See what I'm doing? I'm punching through when that kettlebell is floating. I'm letting the kettlebell touch the back of my wrist, and then I'm pulling that handle back into the arc, or to create the arc back down again. So I'm just floating and punching through. And after I get that down, I can float a little bit higher and punch through. Or punch through and float a little bit higher. More power from the hips. And then eventually, it'll just go all the way to the top and make sense. So you can learn this with a very light kettlebell with your wristband on, so you can do a lot of reps like I just did without fatigue setting in. And you're going to just learn how to pull it up. Pull it up. Keep that arc nice and refined. If you're having a hard time pulling the bell up and then bringing that arc back the way that I was demonstrating, because that can be challenging, practice that. Practice the eccentric phase where that bell drops, makes a U-turn, and comes back behind you. And now from here, it starts coming forward, and you're going to U-turn it again and bring it up. So just start there. You're not even touching your wrist. Just start there. Float it up. Float it up. Float it up. Then eventually, float it up and just punch it through and pull it right back again. Doesn't even need to touch your wristband, but you're just rotating on the axis of the mass of the kettlebell, not on the handle. Well, the handle is also rotating in your hand, okay? And the bell is swiveling on the axis of its mass. I'll do it again. So swing. And if you're not fully comfortable with this and you're learning how to snatch, guess what? Let's just do 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 swings until it becomes unconsciously competent, or until you become unconsciously competent at the swing. And if I'm saying 10,000, I'm not saying in one day. Spread that out over many, many months. Everybody progresses at their own rate. So you start off with your swings. Then you come and tame the arc. Same height. Don't even need to bring the bell up any higher. Let's just tame the arc. Let's make that U-turn. Okay? A few of those. Now let's tame the arc. We're going to make that U-turn, but we're going to bring the kettlebell up higher to above our head. A few of those. Now, as it floats at that top position, we're going to try to punch through while the bell is floating, rotating the axis on the mass of the bell, and then pull it back. Okay? Now we're learning how to float and punch. And, oh, all of a sudden, that just turns into the kettlebell snatch. A little bit more power from the hips, and there you go. Just like the clean, the hook to spear or punch through is going to be vital to your success. If you are muscling, and I see it all the time, crush gripping, there's a time for a crush grip. This is not it. If you are crush gripping that kettlebell, as it comes up, it's not going to rotate freely. The handle in your hand, it's going to get stuck in a straight line, shoulder, fist, bell, and then as it comes up, it will come and smack the back of your wrist because you're not learning to let go. I will say this once, I will say it 1,000 times, you guys. Strength is equal parts tension and relaxation. And with your grip, with this exercise, the clean, the snatch, and just about everything else I can think of with a kettlebell, you have to learn tension in that hook, but you also have to learn relaxation at the same time, okay? So you have to, really the whole essence is to be efficient as possible and not overwork the kettlebell. That's how you start lifting very heavy weights without them feeling very heavy. It's because you learn efficiency, you learn how not to overwork things. That hook to punch is going to be vital to your success in learning how not to do that. It's also going to be vital in your success when it comes to not bruising the back of your wrist, when you learn how to clean, and when you learn how to snatch. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.